I've long been fascinated with why the Victorian era in England, from about the late 1830s to 1900, while it was a time of huge industrial expansion, great scientific expansion, a lot of skepticism about the supernatural, produced a raft of fiction that was full of ghosts. Ghost stories, novels based on ghosts, but also novels that used the ghostly, even if they didn't use actual ghosts, to suggest symbolic things. So I'd like to offer a course that looks at Victorian ghost stories, novels that use the ghostly, and above all, fiction that carries on the Gothic legacy of the 18th century that started way back in the 1760s. I've long been fascinated with this whole issue, after all, of why we like to tell stories that scare us. I'm one of those children who grew up with a big imagination, who thought there were monsters under the bed, there were monsters and ghosts in the dark closet. And ever since then, I've often wondered, why do we make up stories that scare us, even if we know some of those things aren't real? Why do we scare ourselves and yet do it in a way that happens in fiction so that we feel sort of safe from the scare but still scare ourselves? One of the eras in which that happened to a great extent was the Victorian era. We like, for example, to go into a theater and in the dark experience terrors that really arouse our endorphins, so long as we have some sense of the safety that it's in a movie and not real. This is harder to do nowadays because we see so much more violent content on TV as supposedly real. So I'm still interested in why we continue to tell stories like that even when we see more violent content on TV. I'm also interested in how we got to this point, how we keep telling these kinds of stories to excite ourselves but also make ourselves feel safe from these terrors. The 19th century is the era of Edgar Allan Poe in America, but it's also the era of Charles Dickens, Wilkie Collins, George Eliot, Henry James, others that used ghosts. And I want to figure out why these ghosts appear, or ghostly suggestions appear, in novels and fictions written in a time that was supposed to be about greater industrialization, the greater use of science, skepticism about the supernatural, debates over evolution, a totally changing market and financial system, big disruptions in the class structure. Why tell ghost stories in such huge amounts at a time like this when you would think ghosts were out of fashion? I think students who take this course will find out a lot of things at once. One, they'll find out about why we've always been fascinated by ghost stories and why we continue to tell them. They'll also find out how ghost stories in the Victorian era were actually symbolic of much deeper social and psychological issues than just the belief or non-belief in ghosts. Ghost stories are manifestations of some of our deeper concerns about society, about life, about our minds, that we hide behind ghost stories. So I think students will learn an awful lot about why in the 19th century ghost stories were told by seeing how those ghost stories reveal deep-seated psychological and cultural issues that were very important to the 19th century, but are still with us today.